Welcome to Straight Shot Politics. Each episode will bring you in-depth discussion with experts, community leaders, and analysts who will share their insights, experiences, and predictions. From local elections to global diplomacy, we'll provide you with the tools and perspectives you'll need to navigate today's real-world landscape. The views expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts, producers, or this podcast. This podcast is an independent production and is not affiliated with, endorsed by, or sponsored by any organization unless explicitly stated.
Welcome to Straight Shot Politics. I'm Lisa Chafee.
I'm Josh Cease.
And I'm Michael Nash.
Gentlemen, how are you?
Doing well.
Every day's a holiday.
So today we have on the phone with us our candidate for Ohio State Treasurer, Jay Edwards, who previously served in the House of Representatives from 2017 to 2024. He is from Nelsonville, which is southeast Ohio. Sir, how are you? Thank you for joining us.
I'm doing great. I appreciate you guys having me. It looks like this week, unlike last week, we got some sun, but it looks like we're going to have a weekend full of rain. So I hope it doesn't happen, but we're enjoying the great weather down here in southeast Ohio today.
Excellent. So you're in the mountains, right?
Oh, yeah, we're in the hills.
Excellent.
Love it. So tell us what made you want to run for treasurer.
So, I ran for state rep when I was 26, and no one thought I had a chance. My seat was held by a Democrat for a long time. And all of Appalachia is pretty dark red, especially now with Trump. But back in Athens County is kind of the anomaly because we have the university, and the university is about half the size of the county, and it's super, super liberal, as most universities are. And I ran for state rep when I was 26. I was able to win that seat in 2016, and then spent 8 years in the legislature. But my last term, I got to be the chair of the finance committee, and I really knew as soon as I started. I remember when I was 26, 27, my first year, I realized how important the state operating budget was, which is one of the first things you do starting that new first term. And, your first term, it kind of passes you by without you realizing how important it is. It's the most important piece of legislation you get to work on your entire 2 years for your term. And my last term, I was fortunate enough to work my way up to be the chair of the finance committee for the House. My name was on the bill, got to control a $70 billion budget for the state and really know the state finances inside and out. And so, as I was turned out and a lot of people speculated I'd go on to do something else, I was really taking into consideration the statewide offices. State treasurer was the one I had my eye on a long time ago. I know it's kind of weird in today's world in Ohio. We play the game of musical chairs where 8 years they term out and they go run for something else. I legitimately, before I even knew the moves that were being made, had my eye on the state treasurer's race from the very beginning. And that happened to be the one that no other statewide jumped into the race on. It was the open seat. So it kind of just worked out for me, and jumped in, and there's a lot of cool tools. It's not probably the most famous or the sexy seat outside governor, but the other statewide, but it's something that I have an interest in, and the fact that I care about the investments for the state. I know about the state operating budget, and really gives you a voice to talk about the finances of the state of Ohio, which, I love Robert Sprague. I think he's done a great job in there. He really focused on, prudence and finance and safe investment and all that sort of stuff. I want to continue that. I would say the one difference between him and I'm a little bit younger of a guy. I really want to be a voice around the state and educate people around the state on where we are on the finances, where the legislature is choosing to spend your money or the governor is choosing to spend your money, and really try to bring transparency and trust back in the government on how we are spending money in the state of Ohio.
So, Jay, I want to ask, what are some little intricate nuances that the treasurer does that the average person listening may not truly understand? Kind of some of the, pull back the wizard curtain kind of a thing for us, if you will. Just what kind of thing? Yeah, I'd love to find out. I've always been interested because, I think we kind of in this country, at least, Jay, you think of a treasurer, you just think of somebody who signs the checks and that's it, and whatever. But it's a lot more detail oriented than that. So explain to all of us what goes on.
Yeah. I spent most of my time running this primary campaign, going around, and really I would spend, whenever I'd get up and get an opportunity to speak in front of people, I'd spend the first 30 seconds or so just kind of explaining what the office was, because nobody knows what it is. I mean, really hardly anyone knows. The state treasurer, when anybody pays their sales tax or income tax in the state or any fees, the money that comes to the state, the first place it touches is the state treasurer's office. We take that money in, we invest it. The state eventually will appropriate that in the operating budget or throughout the year. Usually there's a gap between 2 to 5 years. In that gap time, the state treasurer invests those funds. The number one rule in the state treasurer's office is you can't lose money. But we try to grow that money so that we're taking that tax money, sound, prudent investment, making sure that there's more money there than what we just brought in, trying to grow that money during that float period of 2 to 5 years. So very short-term investment strategies. The state treasurer, also under Josh Mandel, kind of the last big thing that happened in the state treasurer's office, started the Ohio checkbook program, which the state is required to be on, which tracks all revenues, where they come from, all expenses, where they're going. It's a voluntary program for our local governments. I'd really like to make that a required program for our local governments, as we're seeing all this Medicaid fraud and fraud in general, and lack of trust in all forms of government. Want to have a really transparent website. That website's outdated. It needs to be updated so your normal average layman out there across the state can log into this website and know exactly what they're looking at, whether they want to question the state or their township or their school district or whatever. It's a way of really tracking where money's coming in and where money's going out of any local entity, any entity that's collecting taxpayer money. And then beyond that, the treasurer has these tools called a link deposit program. Most of the money that comes in the state treasurer's office that gets invested is placed on public deposits at banks, and we get a return on that money. I really want to shift. Right now, most of our money goes to the big national banks. And I really like to see, what the banks do is they take that money. When you have more money in public deposits, you can get a little bit riskier and you can loan more. The problem that I notice, and maybe this is because I come from small town Ohio, when you're giving money, $100 million to Bank of America, a national bank, you can't ensure they're leveraging those funds to lend that money out inside the state of Ohio. I really would like to see a big push. Not saying we're not going to do business with the big banks still. We obviously will. But I'd like to see us spread that wealth out a little bit, spread those deposits, that public taxpayer money out to our small community banks. You take $100 million to Bank of America, which is a rounding error for them, or take $5 million and give it to 20 community banks in some of the forgotten about small banks across the state. And you're going to play a big major impact of not just the money staying in Ohio, but the money oftentimes staying right there in that local community. So it's a big deal. It's something that I really want to do. And then the last thing is, the state treasurer has the link deposit program, which is a program. We really have 3 active programs in Ohio right now. One is for small businesses, one is for first-time home buyers, and one is for farmers, called the Ag Link program. We take a set aside of a certain amount of money, and we place that money into a participating bank into that program. Instead of the state getting a 4 or 5% return, 3 or 4 or 5% return on that money, we'll take 2 points less, as long as that 2 points is passed over to someone that applies for that program. So an example I like to use is if a farmer applies for the AgLink program through a participating bank, and that bank will give us, instead of them giving the state a 5% return, it'll give us a 3% return. But instead of that farmer paying an 8% interest rate, they're going to pay a 6% interest rate. So that lower return is passed off 1-to-1 to that local farmer to help him. And that's the same thing for the small business program, and that's the same thing for a first-time home buyer.
Jay, I heard you mention that the treasurer takes the money and invests it. I guess, excuse me, it's not like you're sitting up there being like a hedge fund manager, right? Picking, we're going to do these mutual funds, we're going to put this in this commodity. Explain to us basically what goes into deciding where to invest the money, whom to invest it with, and then I assume you have the final call on that. Well, if you were to be elected, the treasurer, I should say, has the final call.
You'd be surprised. We have back office folks. The treasurer has back office folks that are kind of like traders that operate. Obviously, we're not being risky with this investment. It's a very safe, sound investment that we're looking for very small returns typically. We want to get the best bang for our buck, but we're not day trading. We put out RFPs for set asides of certain pots of money. We look at who's going to give us the best return. One of the things I'm not privy to right now, and it's hard to formulate plans when you're not privy to all the information, is I claim to want to give more money to Ohio banks, try to keep money in Ohio. That is obviously contingent upon what are the returns going to be like from those community banks versus what we're getting from the big banks. So, we do a lot of that. We do a lot of the bonding for the state. The state just passed the capital bill last year, but these are big chunks of money that really are happening on a day-to-day basis. Now, there's money flowing in and out of accounts every day, but it's not a situation where we're day trading or anything like that. It's big pots of money that are going out through a bidding process that we're seeing what return we lock in the return. So it isn't something where we're sitting there waiting every day and we can take a big loss. Now, sometimes there is some risk at play, but these are big chunks of money that go out at certain times of the year, well ahead of time, and it's a bid process. And so, yes, you're right. It's not something to where we're like we're on Wall Street, day trading every day. That's not the case. But there is money going in and out of accounts when it comes to our local government partners and some of that. There's a lot of things that go into it. So another example of a program that runs through the state treasurer's office is the state treasurer handles a pool of money for local governments. So rather than your school district or your local township or your local city investing their state treasurer investing their money in themselves about 20 to 25 years ago, Ohio created this Star Ohio. It's called Star Ohio program, where we allow all the local governments in general areas to pool their money together, give it to the state treasurer. The state treasurer invests those funds into mutual funds, and it's a money market account. So it's not just going to banks; it's going to investment in companies, and it is dealt with folks that are investing, the big firms that is investing that money. It's been super successful. It produces a huge return. It's AAA rated. It produces a huge return for our local governments. And it's something that I think right now, currently, that Star Ohio account and sitting in the state treasurer's office has about $26.5 billion sitting in it.
Wow.
So it's a big deal, and provides a huge return on investment to our local governments across the state.
Jay, we've had Robert Sprague on here before, but I got to kind of disagree with you on something. You're making this thing sound sexy as hell, man. Yeah, you are.
Well, it's funny. I guess I'm younger and a little hard-headed, and maybe I'm a little risky, but I'm a conservative, and I don't hide behind that. And I know it's going to be a tough year, and you're going to have a lot of politicians that are kind of shifting back and forth now that the primary's over and all that sort of stuff. I want people to hold me accountable. I traveled around the state and talked a lot about, DEI, politics that's getting involved in investing. I'll give you an example. When I was in the legislature, it was kind of bad timing. It was right after the Norfolk Southern disaster. The short rail down in Cincinnati, the city needed money. And the short rail down in Cincinnati, they wanted to sell it, this Western Southern Cincinnati Southern Railway, and they needed state approval to do it. And we actually put it in the state budget and allowed them to do it, and it was fine. It wasn't a bad deal for the state. We just gave them approval, basically. And Cincinnati went on to sell that property, and they placed the money into a trust, and it's called the Cincinnati Railway Trust. And I've since went back and viewed that, and it really makes me sick to see 46% of the people's money in Cincinnati, where they sold this public railway that the city had interest in, 46% has to go to equity, social governance, being invested in feel-good things where you have LGBTQ people on the board and all that sort of stuff. And, I really pushed hard for this when I was in the legislature, of not allowing Ohioans taxpayers in the state treasurer's office to be invested in the ESG type investing, politicizing investing. Let's look at returns. Let's not care about the politics of our investment structure. And, the other thing that I talked a lot about on the campaign trail is some of these banks, and they tend to be playing nice right now because there's a new big guy in the White House. But just a few years ago, when President Trump wasn't in office and President Otto Penn was in office, these banks were playing politics, and it may have been from pressure at the White House. I don't know. But, they debanked, the Bank of America debanked the Trump Organization, debanked Turning Point USA, debanked the National Rifle Association, chooses to do business with Planned Parenthood. They choose to proudly do business with Black Lives Matter. They use their ATM cameras to help identify suspects on January 6th. I mean, they play politics with their money. So, I look at that and say, if that happens, there's a chance we're going to have a new president in the middle of my term. If that happens again, I view that as a barrier to entry. That's discrimination. We don't allow discriminating practices in when you're selling a house. We don't allow it in business when you're hiring and firing somebody. You can't hire and fire somebody based off their race or religion or sex or whatever the case may be. I want people to hold me accountable. Now that the primary's over, it's real easy for me to shift and not talk about these things. I'm going to continue talking about them because I think it's a fairness issue. And quite frankly, I'm not sure enough Republicans right now are talking enough conservative things around the state or getting enough conservative things done to really excite the conservatives to show up to vote. I think one of the biggest problems we're going to have this election cycle isn't a Republican versus Democrat issue. It's, are we exciting enough Republicans to actually show up and vote for somebody? Because I think a lot of Republicans are going to sit at home because they're not noticing much difference, maybe not on the national level, but on the state level. They're not noticing much difference when it comes to, 30% increases in their electric bills and 30% increases in their property taxes. And the state's given $600 million to the Cleveland Browns to build a football stadium. There's been slaps to the face to conservatives in the state for a long time. And sometimes I really question what we're doing to excite Republicans in the state. We are a red state. We have supermajority in the House and Senate. All of our statewide are Republicans. But, tell me the last thing that the state's done that's super conservative Republican that is something that we can be proud of, that's saving our taxpayers a bunch of money. Right now, we got Medicaid fraud, we got data centers, we got property tax issues, we got electric issues, and it just seems like we're not addressing some of these things.
Well, you just opened the door for three of the questions that I have for you. Talking about debanking, Senator Andrew Brenner unfortunately lost his primary. And within days of losing that primary, Chase Bank debanked him.
Yeah.
If you are elected treasurer, is there anything that you can do to investigate that, find out what happened, anything at all?
We could definitely, as your statewide office holder, one of the things that I want to do, as you can tell in this conversation, is I want to use the bully pulpit of the office. None of the other, all the statewides right now kind of stay in their own silos. You never hear them comment. I've never heard Robert Sprague or Frank or anybody talk about any issues outside of their realm. They only kind of stick in their issues. It wasn't until, Nick Shirley and other people started exposing Medicaid fraud, they were even talking about it. Meanwhile, I've been talking about the Somalis in South Columbus for a long time. And, I want to use the office as a bully pulpit. You are a statewide candidate. Well, let's face it, most Ohioans aren't following what's going on in state government. They turn on the news every night and they watch, either the Democrat news or the Republican news, and they're watching what's going on in the White House and the Congress, and they're not paying attention to what's going on in state government. I want to try to educate what's going on. I want to talk about these issues. That is something, the Andy Brenner issue is something that I absolutely would talk to our other statewide officials, including the Attorney General's office, to say, something's got to be done. I think I could go to my buddy Keith Faber, if he hopefully gets elected this fall, and go to my buddy Keith Faber and say, somebody's got to look into this. And, what I could do on the back end is, if there is something wrong there, and if it was done for political reasons, I could say that's a barrier to entry of doing business with the state of Ohio. The only way to punch back against this New World Order and DEI and ESG programs and the things that they try to force down our throat, force down conservatives. These things always happen to conservatives. They're not happening to the other side. Mm-hmm. The only way you punch back is by trying to hit their bottom line. And, we got to have people stand up and say, you know what? You're not allowed to do business with the state of Ohio. You're not holding our taxpayer money. Ohio's a Republican state. If you don't hold our conservative values or morals in the state anymore, you're not holding our money anymore. It's a barrier to entry. The same way you can't discriminate against somebody on the basis of their skin color or whatever the case may be, you can't discriminate against somebody based on their political beliefs. And I think these banks and many other institutions got to learn that.
Well, I got to tell you, with regards to the DEI stuff, it makes me very happy to hear what you just said. It really does. We got to take, as Vivek Ramaswamy said in his book, Woke Inc., we have to take the race out of business and the business out of race. I know I'm probably quoting that wrong, but that's the paraphrase of it.
That's the general paraphrase.
Yeah. So one last question. You mentioned the Haslams and the Brown Stadium. So the state used over $600 million from the unclaimed funds pile. And a lot of people don't understand what that is. Can you give us a rundown a little bit of what the unclaimed funds is for, And is it a good idea for us to even be using that money in the way that they're going to use it?
Unclaimed funds, and the state has a huge pile, billions of dollars built up over the years of unclaimed funds. Unclaimed funds happens when there's money, whether it's in an insurance account or life insurance or some weird account out there. Most of them are $50 and under. Some of them are much more than that, where money's just kind of left in some sort of trust, insurance, something, and or pension fund, something, and somebody passes away and nobody claims that money. It goes into the unclaimed funds. Right now, it sits at the Department of Commerce. I'd like to see that sit in the state treasurer's office. It is a pain to get your money. I mean, you log in.
Mm-hmm.
You can log in right now. Type in Ohio unclaimed funds. You can log in and see that you have $15 sitting there, and it might take you 7 days before you could even apply to get it. It's such a pain. They have to run you through the rigmarole. Some of it's like 50 cents, so no one even claims it because the headache you have to go through. It's not worth it. So here's things that I think are that need fixed with the unclaimed funds. But let's face it, there's no difference between unclaimed funds and taxpayer money. It's somebody else's money. And, I hear people all the time that try to justify it by saying, this is the unclaimed funds. It wasn't even, it's not the general revenue fund. It didn't come in from taxes or it didn't come in from this. It's still other people's money. And at the same time, Lee says, you and I came up with a great idea and went up and lobbied the legislature to give us $600 million. Do you think they're going to do it? Do you think they're going to twist and bend into a pretzel and get real creative and figure out a way of taking unclaimed funds to give us that money? Heck no, they're not. So, it's kind of ridiculous. And I bring up the $600 million because $600 million is what they guaranteed in the budget to Jimmy Haslam. But what they actually did was $1.7 billion because they know if they gave money to the Browns, they got to be fair about it, and they're going to have other teams start asking. I like sports. I play college football. I love sports. I love Joe Burrow. I'm a Bengals fan. Joe Burrow's from my area, my home county. I'm not against sports. I know Mr. Haslam. I get along with Haslam. I don't blame Jimmy Haslam for coming and asking for money. That's what he's in a business. That's what he has to do. I blame the lawmakers for doing it. It couldn't have happened at a worse time with this property tax and electric situation that we have here in the state. $600 million to build a football stadium. By the time people get done paying their property taxes and electric bills, they have no money left over to go to the taxpayer-funded stadium. Mr. Haslam, as good of a guy he is, and as much as I enjoy him, the many times I've met him, he's not even a tax-paying citizen in the state of Ohio. He's a resident of Tennessee. And 2 days after the budget passed, bought a $30 million mansion in West Palm Beach. So, I just have a hard time. I guess I think it's the area I come from. My mind first goes to blue-collar, middle-class, middle-income people that are feeling the heat right now of paying $5 a gas, getting high electric bills, high grocery prices, high property taxes, old people getting priced out of their homes because of their property tax situation. That apparently isn't a priority for the state when we're giving $600 million away. You could have taken that $600 million or $1.7 billion and split it amongst all homeowners in the state of Ohio and really try to cut down on people's property taxes. I would have had no problem with that. But the way in which they're doing this is not only really bad politics, it's really bad policy. And I know I make people uncomfortable. I never attack people. I never attack individuals. Even when I'm saying stuff that Republicans did, I make it about the issue. Sometimes Republicans take offense to it. And I've heard Republicans, as they're traveling around the state and they get asked about this, they'll say, well, it was a loan. Well, we loaned him this money. It wasn't a loan. I hate to tell people. It was a grant. It was a performance grant that we gave over to him. If it was a loan, there would be terms to the loan. He would have a certain amount of time to pay it back. He would have an interest rate. There's no interest rate. There's no term to the loan. It's a performance grant. They handed him the money. They said, as long as you get the project done, you hire people to do it. Great. You'll get to keep the money free and clear. We just handed it to him. So I just think it's really bad policy. I think it's one of those 80-20 issues that I'm not even sure some Republicans are aware how unpopular it was. And I plan to talk about it. And, if that offends people, I'm sorry, but I like to tell the truth. And, again, I'm not going to make it about an individual. I'm going to make it about the issue. And I'm going to continue talking about it because if I'm the state treasurer and that kind of stuff happens, I'm going to be talking about it.
Well, I have to tell you, I find it very refreshing because of everybody that I've talked to, be it here on our podcast or just privately, they're just kind of towing the line. So it's refreshing to hear someone who thinks like me and most of us middle class people who, we can't afford to go to any of these games. If anybody would like to help you with your campaign via donations or volunteering, where can they sign up to do that?
Yeah, you can go to edwardsforohio.com. You can log in there to be a volunteer. You can log in and say you want a yard sign. You can log in and say you want to donate to my campaign. I can tell you we're doing a great job. And I know, Lisa, you're involved with the county party, and you're seeing this as well. What's so refreshing right now amongst the Republican Party, in my opinion, everyone's really negative. I think they're seeing the war going on. They're saying, we hope we get out of this war, and we want gas prices to come back down. Everyone thinks it's going to be a really rough year for Republicans. And I know I'm kind of being repetitive at this point, but that kind of what that leads out is, you got people that are trying to separate themselves, Republicans that are trying to separate themselves from Trump, or they're trying to get more, to the center of the road, which I think is fine on some issues, as long as it's good issues and bipartisan issues. But, I sometimes think we lose sight of who our base is, and we got to get them excited to show up to vote for us. And, if you get the base out, we see in Ohio, when you get everybody to show up, Trump wins by 11 points. Bernie wins by 4 points. So we can win just if we give people, we have to give them a reason to show up. So I hope my statewide candidates, state reps, I hope we don't lose sight of that. I hope we don't try to transition back towards the middle too far. It's okay on some issues, but I hope we don't give up some of our beliefs and some of our strong conservative selling points, and we do more to excite people. And I bring that up because I've been meeting with these we have a great group in Ohio. Number one, we have the biggest young Republican group in the state. We have great young Republican groups, regional groups popping up all over the state. I was just up in Northeast Ohio with the Wayne Republicans, the Wayne Homes, Medina, and Ashland County young Republicans. These kids are not just super passionate about politics. They are super intelligent on politics. They follow what's going on. They know what's going on in the state government. They know what's going on in their local government, their school boards. They follow what's going on at the federal government. These kids are super excited, but they want somebody to show up and be excited about. And they see a lot of issues at the federal level. They see a lot of issues at the state level that isn't really exciting them too much. So we've got this new group of people that I don't think we're selling ourselves to. They're not traditional Republicans. They don't show up in polling, and they don't show up in spreadsheets, and they don't really realize that they are who we're trying to sell. But if we can really go out and get these young conservatives right now, and it's men and women, and go out and really work hard to get these young conservatives and get them excited for us. Not only are we going to have a ton of door knockers and a ton of youth energy and a ton of people putting up yard signs and doing things for us, but we're really going to get those folks to show up and vote. And I think we're seeing a generational thing happen with young people right now that's really exciting for Republicans. But I can tell you, they are very also independently minded. And unless Republicans start getting them excited about something, there's a chance we're going to lose these folks. There's a chance they just get out of politics. They don't care about it anymore. Or there's a chance they end up being Democrats or whatever the case may be. They're really disappointed on the way some things are going right now, and we really got to try to figure out a way of maintaining and keeping these people into the party.
Agreed wholeheartedly. Well, I am looking forward to seeing you. I know definitely September 26th, you're coming to speak at the Ohio Freedom Rally. And
Yes.
In the meantime, hopefully we'll see you soon. And we wish you the best of luck. Jay Edwards, our next treasurer for Ohio. Sir, thank you. This has been Straight Shot Politics.